December 23, 2018. Preparing Room for Joy. Neil Worthington, licensed Unity teacher and spiritual leader at Unity of Payson, Arizona.
How many of you are a parent? Okay, most. How many of you know a parent? Oh, well, you don't have. So, think of a parent, could be you, that's for the very first time about to announce that they are going to have their very first child, or you are going to have your very first child. What an excitement. Wow, a few people know, but not too many, we're keeping it a secret for a little while. But what excitement there is, this newness of life is coming. And so, you set about to prepare for that child, that first child, that new life. And there's a room that sort of was the guest room, but has gathered a whole lot of other things. Maybe it was used a little bit for an office, or maybe it's just a junk room. But it was thought of at one time as the nursery. And so the nursery must be prepared for this new life that is to come. So out comes all the junk. You borrow a pickup truck and it goes to the thrift store. You clean the floors and say, my goodness, that carpet is just not suitable for the new baby. Look at the walls and the drab wallpaper, the dingy paint, stare back at you, and you know that that's got to be prepared. And you wonder, what color? Maybe you don't know if it's a girl or a boy, so you try to pick a color. And then you want to make sure that all of the outlets are working, that the lights are working, what will we need for extra light, and are the curtains going to let in light? You're preparing that room for that baby. Well, all of these parents, or the parents that you knew, were also preparing themselves for that child. Not only that room, but preparing themselves. And they went through a personal inventory of what they wanted to be for that child, what they needed to kind of clear out, what they needed to make alive in themselves to do that. Well, this story is not all that unlike the story we tell here at Christmas time. That of two parents, Mary and Joseph, who were excited because, wow, this unusual event of a child in unusual circumstances was about to happen. The announcement had come from an angel, and they began to announce it even though there was some prejudice against their situation. Perhaps they began to announce it, and they began to prepare for that. Now, if we follow the Bible story, we know that they did a lot of personal inventory, went through a lot in terms of preparing themselves for the birth of this child that was to be Jesus, or Yeshua as sometimes known. And they had a very unusual circumstance in that they had to travel during the time that the baby was to be born. Of course, they went to pay taxes as had been decreed by the authorities, and found themselves in Bethlehem with no proper room, but a stable. I suspect not only had they prepared themselves, but they did their very best in those last hours to prepare that stable, that room, that space for the coming of the child that was to be born to them. Room for joy. That's what they were making. That's what the parents were making. That's what you were that parent, was making. Room for joy. New life. So, let's look at something differently. What is this?
Advent candles.
Advent candles, Advent wreath. Okay, we got it. Advent candles and Advent wreath. You know, the funny thing is we think from here ourselves in 2018, we think things have been like this, and maybe that Christmas has been like this for ages and ages and centuries and centuries. Well, it wasn't so. It was not until the mid-16th century that light was used to celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus. Before it had been kind of grim, but light did begin to be celebrated. And it wasn't until nearly the middle of the 1850s or thereabout that this Advent wreath had its start. Here's what happened. German pastor named, let me see, get the last name right, Heinrich Wicker, had dedicated himself to the urban poor. And so he began a ministry in the city of Hamburg, and that ministry was to children specifically. And he started a school for those children. And the children were sometimes unruly, sometimes very excited, but as Christmas rolled around after a few years, there was some excitement about what was to come then, and the celebration of light, and he was plagued with the question again and again, how long until Christmas? How long until Christmas? I remember when I was a child, Daddy, how long until we get there when we were going on the trip? This childlike how long was there. So Pastor Henrik had a unique solution. Found an old cartwheel, got the cartwheel, and he gathered 28 candles, 24 red ones and 4 white ones. And he placed them around the cartwheel. That was for 28 days. And when the question was asked, how long until Christmas, you only had to look at the cartwheel, because each day the appropriate candle was lit. Weekdays, 6 weekdays, and then a white one for Sunday. 6 weekdays, a white one for Sunday. 6, on and on, you got it. So the Advent wreath, wasn't really a wreath, it was a cartwheel to start with, began. And it caught on. Other churches in Germany and then on through Europe got the idea and used that celebration of light coming to us. I'm not sure if they thought being us, but light coming to us was celebrated. Well, it got to the U.S. eventually in the late 20s and maybe the early 30s. When it got here, it took the form of a wreath. Of course, the cartwheel was circular, indicating the vast, unlimited love of God. And evergreens were put around that instead of the cartwheel. And I think there was even a coat hanger version at one point. What it is that gave that sense of great light that was there. And so the 4 candles, now it was limited to only 4, the candles for Sunday were the candles of hope, peace, love, and joy. So we brought ourselves to the expression, to the Advent wreath this season. Of course, this is the 4th season, or 4th Sunday of Advent in the season. And that is what? Were you paying attention? What was that? Oh, joy, you got it. So joy, as we define it, is the free and unrestrained experience of life, happiness, blessedness, and bliss. Joy is what we celebrate this morning. But the interesting thing is, Reverend Charlie pointed out to us last week, love came before joy. Love was last Sunday, the 3rd Sunday of Advent. And so, for that love, it seems like it almost was a prerequisite to be able to experience that unlimited expression of happiness, blessedness, and bliss. But I'd like to talk about that just a little bit, because that's part of the preparation, preparing ourselves for joy, preparing to receive, to be joy. So, two things about that. What can keep us in that arena of love from receiving, expressing, and being joy? A hard heart can do that. So, what is there that causes you to have a hard heart? Interesting, there's an interesting scriptures in the Christian scriptures of, in Hebrews it says, "Do not harden your hearts as in the day of testing in the wilderness." Of course, that referred to the Israelites wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. Really tough situation, really hard, wandering in survival mode. And what happened is that a few hearts got hardened in that survival mode. I relate to this. I just want to share a little bit about myself. I grew up, as many of you know, as the son of a Baptist minister, and also the son of a Baptist minister's wife. Makes sense. My mother and I never got along easily from the very beginning. Now I can see that with eyes of compassion, but she was mentally ill. And nothing I could do would please her. Nothing was possible to escape her anger. Nothing was possible for me to do to feel love. She would break out in fits of rage against me. And I would try to comply, I would try to do my best, and I still was not able to please her. I went into survival mode. I found a way to avoid the worst of her wrath. Found a way to just close down so it didn't impact me too much. And I did that through my childhood, complying as best I could, but hardening my heart to survive. Took that into my adult life, and it turned into resentment. And that resentment lasted for more than 40 years. Hardness of heart happens in the difficult circumstances of life. But it need not remain so forever. Let me go back to that Hebrew scripture, and it talks about the community helping with that hardness of heart. Take care, brothers and sisters, that none of you have an unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another every day, so long as it is called today, so that you may not be hardened. So it starts with that survival wilderness experience, goes to the point of saying, encourage one another, so that you may not be hardened. So I'd like to say that one of the first ways that we address love, that power, the power of love that attracts, that harmonizes, that unifies, is to soften our heart. And it is a choice. Let me go on with my story. My mother was 94 years old, approaching 95. She lived in a nursing home some 40 miles distant from where I was, not inaccessible, but I didn't visit frequently. And a friend encouraged me to visit more frequently. Even drove with me one time to see my mom. So it was the beginning of choosing to soften my heart. Found out some miraculous things happening. My mom was suffering from dementia, so we couldn't have a lucid conversation. But suddenly I found what I describe now as the real mom beneath the mental illness. The real child of divine expression that was there all along, but hidden from me. So as I began to soften, so did she. Perhaps because of her dementia, it didn't matter. We didn't communicate in sentences and discussions and remembrances, although she had some good memory of things way back. But she sat staring at a TV for the most part, but with her head on my shoulder. An expression of love that I've never before experienced. It came because of an encouragement to soften my heart. So I'd like to suggest it. Number one, soften your hearts. Number two, healing the broken heart. I suspect every one of you have had a broken heart about something, whether small or earth-shaking. So, I'd like to suggest that that's not a place where we need to stay either. There are stages of grief. If you study that, you understand some of the stages of grief. But what I think happens when we experience those losses, and that's what heartbreak is, a great sense of loss, is that we get stuck and we don't move through those stages of grief, which are very necessary, but we don't move through them. We kind of don't allow ourselves. For some reason, we just resist. We want to stay broken. So it may be at the very beginning where we're actually denying the heartbreak. It may proceed to anger, where we're angry with it. We may not acknowledge the anger to start with. Or we just may express it totally inappropriately, maybe even toward someone that has nothing to do with the heartbreak. Or we may get to the stage where we ourselves feel guilty about that heartbreak. What didn't I do that I could have done? What, if only I had. Perhaps we're stuck there if we get that far. Or we may go on to that deep, dark place of depression. And just lay in there for a long time. On some level, resistant to the idea of being whole, of healing that broken heart. Hopefully, we get to the point where we accept the circumstances and hope in what end result. So, I'm suggesting that healing the broken heart is that part of love that may keep us from the expression of joy, keep us from getting on to that fourth week of Advent. If you're stuck, you may not be able to do it all by yourself. You may need friends and family to help you work through that loss. You may need a professional to help you work through that loss. But don't settle for being stuck. Know that joy, that expression of happiness, blessedness, and bliss is there once you get through that. Thank you for sharing, Maurice, about your loss. So the question is, how do we do that? I'd like to ask this question. How do we do that? And there are 4 ways that I'm going to suggest. By the way, this isn't first, second, third, and fourth. It's just 4 ways, and you can get started at any point on these, and you know what point it is for you to start. First one. In Unity, we talk often about what we envision, what our mind is occupied with, is what happens in our life. So here is a cue to livening, to making full that envisioning. Number 1, remember the times when you did have joy. Remember those experiences, and remember them vividly, vibrantly. Just milk the joy that you had back then, or there, or even further back, way back in childhood. Secondly, as you look ahead with eyes of faith, see joy. That's just so important. Imagination. If we can't experience the joy in our reality as we know it, we can do that in imagination, and it will impact us just the same. So imagine that and feel it, absolutely feel it to your bones. Feel that joy. So start there if you can. That's one starting place. It's not the only place to go. You've got to go on to the next ones too. And the next 2 are the points that we've spoken about this morning. Choose to soften your heart. What are the resentments that hold you back? What are the places you can say, well, I can forgive, but I'm not going to forget that. Well, you haven't forgiven. Choose to do that. It'll make a difference for you if you do. Third, welcome a whole heart. Don't sit in that place where you say, I don't think I'm ever going to get over that. I'm never going to forget that. I'm going to keep you from the joy we want. And then finally, just hold on. If you haven't put that hat on that's near you, now's the time. Celebrate! Wherever you're at, any of this other stuff, an entry point for it can be for you this day and this holiday to celebrate, because that is the very nature of our being. We are joy. That's how we are created. We are an expression of the divine. We celebrate that. So I say, remember we sang an old Come On Faithful, let every heart prepare in room. Well, we were going to say it just a little bit differently. Let your heart prepare room for joy today and every day. And so it is.